Global development, a terminology that requires further examination and analysis since we live in a globalized world. Today, I have the pleasure to be welcoming Mr. Geronimo Frigerio, who's the director of the GF Consulting Group. My name is Dr. Marios Efthymiopoulos, and this is Prime Analysis. Mr. Frigerio, thank you very much for joining us from Buenos Aires, and thank you very much for joining us in this video call. Global development, what is it?
Thank you very much, Marios. My pleasure. It is the art, I would say, of making progress from being a poor country to becoming a rich country. It has been studied mainly by economists, but through time we came to learn that it is absolutely multidisciplinary. It combines understanding how laws and institutions have to be assembled to create growth. However, such growth sometimes in poor countries do not take into consideration the informal sector, which is huge, which is massive. So integrating formal growth with informal growth is among the tasks ahead, still to be tackled by development. In addition to that, it is like we understand development to be needed to happen within a democracy, but in many developing countries, such as the ones in Latin America, you find these democracies to be quite bureaucratic as well. So there's another challenge for development yet to be tackled. In addition to that, we understand that mostly across the world, that development needs to be achieved within a market economy. However, market economy conditions, especially in developing countries, are not competitive for micro enterprises. And there you have another challenge to be tackled. And in addition to the three things that I have mentioned before, we now have high environmental standards that many developing countries are failing to cope with. So I would say that these are to become to shift from being a poor country and evolving into a rich country has plenty of challenges ahead to do with what to reform and how to make progress, continuous progress towards evolving into a developed country.
Let me go into further details, if I may. You've put a lot of things on the table, things that we can discuss, I presume, for hours. But most importantly, I would like to ask you, how does a person such as yourself, as a director of GF Consulting Group, works with regards to global development? We know in terminologies, academic or scientific terminology, we know global development to be inclusive to trade, inclusive to innovation, pioneering knowledge and technology, transfer of knowledge, transfer of technology. So how does a company such as yourself, and yourself in this case, work with countries such as Latin America, for example?
Yes, I work a lot in Latin America and the Caribbean, and the angle has to do with reform. I chose reform because I love the process of reform, which is always building consensus about an innovation. And it's interesting because even if there is a straightforward diagnosis that something is wrong or that there are bottlenecks for development, when you try to innovate, it usually takes, I would say, plenty of consultation, building a thorough diagnosis, and setting the grounds for a process of reform that usually has to change institutional arrangements and, I would say, regulation. So I would say that one thing that I've learned through the years in all the different countries is that even if there is an agreement on innovating towards a shared goal, the process of reform is usually more challenging than what it looks at the very beginning of each process. But that is, I would say, our take: reforming, innovating, trying to really make a progress that you can really measure.
Considering these developments, and I know from your background, you're a lawyer, you have been involved both in the political and economic aspects. How does a process start with regards to a state that comes and says, I would need to I need to lower my inflation rates. I need to boost development. I need to boost infrastructure. I need to boost investment, things that will be bringing my market share into a more globalized effect, and at the same time give the opportunity for primary or secondary companies to set up their own investment, their own job investment, if I may say, their capital investment in this case. How does one start?
Your question is it's very interesting because you are focusing a lot on what politicians usually focus, or ministers of finance, which is how to boost, I would say, large investments, how to have macroeconomic stability to leverage foreign direct investments, or I would say an export-led growth approach. However, when you go into the details, and this is something that I learned through the years. For example, in a region as the one that I work, Latin America, 99%, and let me stress that out, 99% are micro, small, and medium enterprises. Those are the real job creators. And when you go and study that in detail, over 90% of that 99% are micro enterprises. And when you go to the informal sector, pretty much everything is micro enterprise. So those ministers of finance are in many cases focusing on the large investments, but the real path to development, the key to development, has to do with building a digital and very, I would say, smart environment for those micro enterprises that can create wealth, but also, and this is very important, create jobs. And if they create jobs, in every job creation, you're lifting someone from poverty. So I would say that the toughest challenge has to do with aligning efforts for, I would say, boosting the economy that that 1% of large companies can basically help growth, but also at the same time helping that 99%, I would say, grow and blossom out of informality and into the formal sector. It is the combination of both that it's usually, I would say, difficult to be understood by ministers of finance.
Going from government to the private sector, how does the private sector react to global phenomena? We've seen a lot of changes in the geopolitical and geostrategic landscape. We see a lot of developments because of the environment. We see a lot of developments for further negotiations, which include also the private and the private sector. But then again, we do not live in a world that is really secure when it comes down to global development or global investment. On the other hand, we are looking at massive wave, let's say, of pioneering methodologies and innovations through the use of technology or any kind of use of technology, considering that some of us may anticipate threats. Threats are either man-made or non-man-made. So how do we boost the private sector? How does the private sector support, understands, comprehends these changes? And I know that you're an author of a new book, new book that came out called Simple and Desarrollo, which is development, if I'm putting it correctly. And you're stressing such things on how to, basically. So how do we do it? How is the private sector react to this, and how do we do development in such a case?
The focus of the question is quite on target, because the private sector wants to do business, and they want to do business across borders. If the time, cost, and complexities associated to doing business in one's jurisdictions are very high, doing business in your jurisdictions becomes cumbersome. What the private sector wants, not only those, I would say, that red tape regulations and those bottlenecks to be erased, but they also want to do business across borders. And for example, in Latin America, where you have countries that have been, I would say, part of the same colonial system, and therefore have the same language, the same rules, and similar bureaucratic institutions, the private sector wants such poor alignment to change into a good alignment. Why can't these countries have good rules, good institutions, and therefore good opportunities to do business across countries? For example, I travel across different countries: Honduras, Nicaragua, Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay. and they usually think nationally. Why are they doing business, for example, in business environments of 45 million people, when they can do business in 700 million people, which is 10% of the population of the world, that basically have similar rules and similar, I would say, cultural arrangements? And even in Africa, because I studied that when I was at the World Bank, you have OHADA countries that, I mean, you can basically harmonize rules for doing business there, and you have the I would say, countries with an Anglo-Saxon legal origin that also can basically harmonize their rules for doing business. So the private sector wants to blossom regionally and do business as large as possible. I would say that the toughest challenge for governments when regulating the private sector in the times to come is that no one will be able to stop the digital revolution. Now you have, I would say, I call it in my new book, which by the way, it's
Yes.
Desarrollo, development. I call it e-globalization, because basically what we can see, as opposed to the globalization that we saw at the beginning of this millennium, we are witnessing people from all around the world investing, co-investing, designing, and participating in blockchain efforts, creating digital assets. And it's easy to see in the first generation, such as, I don't know, Bitcoin, or we can witness this with Ethereum and other, I would say, projects. But the point is that people that don't know each other are trusting each other to invest and taking care of their digital reputation. And that, I would say, it's still unregulated. It's unclear what those
Yes.
digital assets are. So I would say that the private sector is becoming more and more entrepreneurial, even if there is uncertainty in the business environment. And I would say governments, which have been, I would say, failing to do their job right in most developing countries for quite a few decades, and failing to innovate, are facing, I would say, a new reality, which is informality is no longer penalized. People are going informal in many ways, in many countries of the world. So I would say that there is a chance in this new era for governments to sort of catch up with the latest digital developments, and basically put private sector development at the center of their agendas and reinvent government, I would say, structures to be more efficient, more digitalized. And I think that the case of Estonia, even if that is the case only for Estonia, sheds light on how you can make a bureaucratic government into a digital machinery and make huge progress in just 20 years.
I want to ask you a few things because you went from the ecosystem. I will call the whole thing the ecosystem, but you went from the analogic to the digital environment. You went from startups to innovation to pioneering to setting up. And I saw your book. I don't know if you can show it again. You have an inner circle. You have a circle there, and I'm wondering, is this circle the circular economy that we're talking about?
Yes, it is a circular economy, but if you take a look, it's interesting because it has not, I mean, this part is yet to be filled, and that is the process of development. Development is a yet to be achieved task. And if you think about it, I mean, how many countries have been able to develop in the past 60 years just following mainstream advices? Pretty much none. The countries that have made progress in the way to develop, and that is why I was bringing the concept of the art of development, the achievements have been, I would say, or progress has been made within their own cultural boundaries. Countries that are able to develop are doing it their own way. There's no mainstream
There's
way to
no,
develop.
of
And
course.
I would, and especially for Latin America, I argue that countries will be able to make progress within their own culture, formalizing what's being today being penalized and being informal. So accepting the way that we do business, accepting the way that we can make progress, it's a much smarter way to lead the progress from being poor to being rich, and also harmonizing a region that naturally can do business together.
Can I ask something? I mean, I know your book is about economic development in Latin America, and you're talking about the system of reforms, the system of the visionary system of or the strategic pathway, if you want, with regards to global development, public and private, small, medium businesses, and large businesses in this sense. Can you take a case study that you have developed within your own book about Latin America? This is a part of a field that is very much interested also to our audiences, because we come from the Southeast Med. So we do envision global trade. There's the Chamber of Commerce and Trade that actually deals with global trade affairs. But can you please explain to me, how is the vision of a country such as Argentina, for example? You're in Argentina right now. What is the vision on global development? How do they envision the rest of the world seeing all these challenges that are taking place right now?
Well, the first thing is that there is no vision. There is no clear vision. When you don't have a vision, it's difficult to really make progress. So even if this goes back to the essential things that we study when we go, I don't know, to a business school. I mean, countries such as Argentina don't have a clear vision. They don't ambition to become a developed country, because development is both a means and an end. But the end is not just to make progress, it's to expand that 20% of rich countries that today are developed countries. Why not moving from the group of poor countries into the group of rich countries? That is what you first need, a clear vision. Once you have a clear vision, then you can make progress by means of innovations. And let me give you cases that I describe in my book, but are open to, I would say, to most countries in the world. For example, you were speaking about Argentina. Argentina has 20 ministries. This means 20 bureaucracies, 20 public services that are ill-provided and that have been failing to be professionally provided for decades. I suggest, since Argentina is a poor country, reducing it just to 5 priorities, 5 ministries that you can, I would say, keep through time for at least 20 years and help you focus on those priorities, which are a Ministry of Economy, Health, Education, Security, which includes defense, and I call it Institutional Relations, a new one, which basically merges the Ministry of the Interior with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. In that way, with such a minimalistic approach, you can focus on your top priorities. But here comes the most interesting catch. Argentina has 24 provinces, which is 24 subnational entities. Why have them with, I would say, each of them different institutional arrangements? Why not make them uniform? Have them also organized within this similar structure. So let's say a province will have the same 5 ministries as the national governments. And if you go one lower level, you have over 1,200 municipalities. Why not harmonize the whole structure? And when I speak that, I am saying, okay, you can reform to make uniform the whole institutional structure of a country, to then digitalize it, but not before. Make it simple, keep it in a harmonic way, and then digitalize them. That's the first reform. The second reform that I propose is governments in most poor countries, such as the ones in Latin America, fail to have a methodology to do business. They just invent on the road. And what I suggest is, let's adopt a universal methodology that people understand. Let's deal with every single task as a project. And governments understand what projects are. They have an objective. They have a term. I mean, it's not endless in time. They begin and they end. And they have activities that are eligible for financing. And they have a means of executing. They plan, then they contract someone to do what they need to do, and then they pay for it. The third proposal has to do with thinking regional. As we are being seen, for example, Latin America is being seen as a region that has been taking a nap for over 20 or 30 years or more. My proposal is, okay, imagine that Argentina raises their hand and says, hey, I am organizing all my country in just 5 ministries, vertically and horizontally. And I am also adopting a bold methodology to professionalize my deliveries, and everything will be treated as a project. And I am also expecting Brazil and Mexico and
So
Colombia
the
and
big
Chile and
countries. Yes.
Uruguay. Hey, we are almost 10% of the global population, and we are going to do business. Don't look at us as a team or a bunch of countries that are fully disorganized. Look at us as a serious player that, without asking for permission, we are trying to make efforts to go to enlarge that 20% of rich countries. And the fourth proposal, which I have been working a lot in Belize, has to do with unleashing the potential of micro enterprises. And what do they need? They need simple rules and they need a digital environment. So what does that mean? They need just one law, one simple text, at the very most 3 pages, where you can understand how to open, manage, and close a business, pretty much similar to what you would be needed or required to open a Facebook web page. You would need just one digital application where you could open, close, and manage your taxes within that digital application. One flat tax that you pay at the end of your of the year, with a fixed percentage of that you would owe for your earnings, and just one window to speak to government. So keeping it simple so that you can bring everyone into the formal sector, it's a key measure to make, I would say, that debt capital that Hernando de Soto used to speak about last century into powering your private sector.
All this while you're talking about these aspects, I'm thinking on the way that we are seeing Latin America. So on the one hand, we have a very important and fully committed, blossomed culture, which is diverse. You have the result of many countries that gained their independence throughout history, people that actually migrated over the years in the last century and probably even still now to Latin America. We have seen a lot of historical challenges and the connections that countries of Latin America held either with Europe or the United States and Canada, or with the former Soviet Union, today Russia, or even with China. And suddenly today we also have very, very good, intense relations in a positive way with the Arab world, with the Gulf countries. So on the one hand, we see this path. On the other hand, we have a lot of challenges, considering the fact that we have a constant battle in Central and Latin America with regards to drug trafficking, criminal justice elements. We've seen earlier this year the attempts that were made against the Prime Minister of Argentina, which do not really solidify as stability. Then again, we have other countries, especially in Central America, like Panama, for example, where on the one hand they had development, but every now and then there were some accusations, legal accusations, and so on and so forth, which actually brought Panama into the eye of the attention on what is legal and what is not. But you also have civilizations which are multicultural, multilinguistic, as you said, and they also are demographically very plentiful. There are millions of people living in Latin America. And although the European Union, for example, is a big union, Latin America is also big. And considering this, there's a large proportion of the world that speaks either Spanish or Portuguese, the languages which are very similar to this, like Argentinian and Brazilian with Portuguese and so on. And that really brings people to wonder, do I go, do I not go, are we developed or are we not? And it seems through your discussion that you're bringing the discussion into an era of technology. Now, I'm giving you ideas for your probably next book about how technology impacts the world and the world of global development. But in fact, technology is aligned with global development and global trade, pioneering, transfer of knowledge, transfer of technology, and so on and so forth. Where do we stand with the element of pioneering technology. I know you said that in government affairs we should limit the ministries into a handful of ministries with subdivisions and clear-cut contracts and probably projects. But in technology world, in other parts of the world, let's say in the Gulf, you can do a business through your application, through your phone. You can open a bank account. In Europe also, we are engaged into the technology framework. Where do we stand in terms of technology in Latin America in real time, considering that A, there is poverty, and we didn't mention on that. There is a battling of poverty, but it's there. There's also local indigenous affairs to be taken care of. In Northwest Latin America, there is also the element of environmental degradation. We saw that now President Lula is in the realm of Brazil, and there is a big discussion about the Amazon. But it's not only about Amazon. There's also Colombia, which has a big saying into this. Where do we stand on these things with the evolution of technology in what we may say as global development? That you probably know as well. That global development, in order to be reached, we need stability and security.
Well, I fully agree with your vision. I mean, you have described a reality in a very good way. And let me sort of frame it. Yes, it is a very open, I would say, it is a business-friendly environment. Latin America can do business with the US, with Europe, with the Gulf country, with Russia, with China. It's open for business, I would say, and it has always been open for business. However, when you take a look, government or governments have failed to be up to the task. And the private sector has always been making efforts. And today, with the digital revolution, you see that the private sector is finding it easier and easier to do business, I would say, going around governmental regulations. I mean, you have unicorns blossoming around the region. You have micro-enterprises doing digital businesses across the world. And you can see that they are not regulated really nowhere. I mean, they have, I would say, they're somewhere, but nowhere at the same time. And I would say that what we have to learn is that most of Latin American countries have inherited rules from Europe. So, for example, let's take Argentina. We have copied and pasted the constitution from the US, but it was not thought or designed by us. When you see, I don't know, countries as Panama that you brought to my attention, or Colombia or Mexico, I mean, basically the Spaniards brought these rules that were originally developed by the French, and they don't work here. I mean, informality just signals that these rules are not good for these societies to blossom. They don't work. And you brought the issue of justice. There is no justice, because this system, which is the French system of justice, where everything goes to one judge that stays in office pretty much for life, doesn't work. So I would say that there is a huge opportunity to throw away plenty of those rules, to reinvent plenty of those institutional arrangements, to embrace the digital revolution, and to think outside the box on how to make progress and reforms to get it right. And I'll tell you why. Because the world is also a mess. I mean, when you look at it in perspective, we witnessed the US, for example, being, I would say, the global superpower for the past 50 years. However, do we see the US being the global superpower for the next 50 years? It is quite unclear. We see the emergence of China. China, that they don't only have a huge, I would say, military power, but also commercial power. They are already very well positioned, dominating Asia, Africa, and they're trying to penetrate into Latin America. It is a new world. Who would have thought the United Kingdom self-excluding themselves from their national area of trade, after, I would say, advocating for free trade for centuries? And now you see them without finding their natural partners to do trade. It's like the world is quite, I would say, we are witnessing continental Europe dealing with a conflict after the Russian invasion to the Ukraine, creating quite tension over there and having to reinvent their energy matrix. So I would say, being the world quite a mess, and I am saying this humbly, after the pandemic, I cannot predict what's going to happen, but we can pretty much project that the following decade will be quite confusing. I would say my vision is that a country that has lived in confusion, that knows, I would say, the tensions of chaos, such as everyone in Latin America, and can take advantage of this global chaos and basically reinvent themselves towards economic development, leveraging on the digital revolution. I think that Latin American countries have to hug, embrace every bit of the digital ecosystem. They have to become digital hubs.
I'm trying to somehow go in a more elaborative way. The security aspect, because you mentioned it 3 times. You mentioned, summing up basically what you just said, volatility. Volatility is so big that we do not anticipate how things are going to go. We definitely know that the Ukraine-Russia war has made an impact. However, I also foresee that this was an opportunity for other new markets to open up, and such as the Gulf, Latin America, for example, actually gives an impetus of an opportunity. It gives an opportunity. But at the same time, I will come back to what I said initially, that the element of security is not given. In several countries, there is an element of security and insecurity. Insecurity within the state with regard to what is happening, or the bilateral relations of countries. You better know what has been happening in the latest months within 2023. And you at some point mentioned that you cannot foresee exactly what's happening, especially after the pandemic. So if we are to put into perspective several things, the pandemic is the X point, the point of change, where we're massively going into technology, and I think we would agree on that. The point X is also a point of a new start that gives opportunity, but also a lot of challenges, brings forward a lot of challenges, which are more global. And I think this is the negative part of global development, because through technology, we communicate as we are doing right now. We are doing our work with our associates. I know you have associates around the world. We have associates around the world. And this is a good thing. But then again, we are also informed of the things that are happening at the same time, which on the one hand, we should be informed. On the other hand, this causes a lot of massive fear. If we look at the banking sector, if we look at the investment sector, if we look at the stock market, you've seen what happened within 2023 with U.S. banks and the impact that it had in other banks, which may not be directly related. But then again, it has brought a lot of publications, especially from known journals and periodicals. They're actually saying, are we going to another recession? Are we going to another banking recession? Are we seeing growth or not? Are we seeing inflation? So on and so forth. And somehow this has a direct impact to all households, rich or poor, in Argentina or in Shanghai. So I'm wondering, can we actually put those things somehow into a perspective that actually sees and shows or guides us to forecast or risk assess, if you want to call it else, the near future?
I agree with you. I agree with you that there is lack of security in countries where poverty, informality, and unemployment are the rule. And those have been the rule, for example, in all countries of Latin America for the past 50 years. And I have documented that in my first book, Simple. So what you have now is the opportunity of reform. The X that you show, that you have identified, it's, I would say, the window of opportunity. Those countries that are able to reform, and even if it sounds, I would say, strange, this means while you don't have sanitation in many parts of your country, you will have to be embracing blockchain, and that might be a bit chaotic. Those countries will make progress. Digitalization does not necessarily mean progress. You can remain poor while being digitalized. The task of becoming a developed country is one that requires creativity, consensus, and above all, consensus between the public sector and the private sector. I think, and with a vision of perspective, that those countries that are able to align private and public interests in a public-private dialogue with a focus of reforms for a continuous effort to achieve the goal that is being set in a vision of development, which means becoming a developed country, will be able to progress, and security will dilute as a problem. However, those countries that fail to understand that X point that you have highlighted and remain stagnant will be very difficult to do business with. Poverty will continue to soar, and security will be an issue. So I would think we are at a turning point, and I would say that many will be able to maximize these at an individual level. Many will be able to maximize this at a corporate level. But my opinion and my vision is that this is a window of opportunity for global development, especially for those countries that understand that they can sort of accelerate the pace towards economic development in just 2 decades.
It's very interesting being said, and thank you very much for this. I mean, as I said, we can go on and on for hours. I'll try to wrap it up somehow on emphasizing on two things. Global development, as you said in the beginning, is about fighting poverty. I know that we shared some points in the beginning, and we said that we want to talk about those things because it's very important. Are we fighting poverty? This is my first question. And my second question, are we truly committed to an innovation through technology that really allows us? I mean, we see a lot of publications and a lot of announcements. Young people have developed these innovative apps, these startups. We're using a lot of the word startups for the last decade. It's not new as a terminology. But I'm wondering, in that circular economy of a country that you said may lack vision or processes or institutional approach or common understanding that we need to make it more simple and more to the point, are we fighting poverty, and are we giving the opportunity to young people to develop and blossom globally?
Yeah, your first question is brilliant, Marius, because we're not fighting poverty, we're managing poverty. And poverty cannot be managed any longer. We have been managing poverty for the past 60 years. I mean, why is it that we don't have plenty of success stories? Why is it that, I mean, it's difficult at international conferences to speak about something that has worked? I mean, we have exceptional pilot cases, but we don't have robust, I would say, learnings. Nobel Prizes have been awarded prizes for writing brilliant papers, but not for bringing countries out of poverty. And my point is, let's take it back to the basics. If you have a problem at home, you solve it yourself, or you hire someone to solve it, but you keep your focus on your problem. Same on my end. Countries will have to figure out how to grow on their own watch, in their own terms, observing their own culture. They know better than anyone their own problems. And the mindset has to change, not to think on how to reduce poverty, but how to create growth, how to create jobs, how to multiply job creation, how to redefine jobs, looking into the future. And looking into the future, that goes to your second question. Yes, the digital revolution is unstoppable, especially among the young generations. And I would say that it is a task for our generation to think and evolve, even if we can't understand all the underpinnings that this digital transformation implies, even if we make mistakes, but we need to understand and I would say evolve even with partial understanding. And what we do have, I would say as a generation, is we know how to deal with frustration. We know how to be resilient. I would say we have that to bring to the table. And we don't have pretty much an option. So I would say we poor countries need to face the question of development by means of necessity this time.
Geronimo, that was a great discussion that we had, and I really thank you very much for the time and the time difference that we had from Cyprus to Buenos Aires. I would like to invite you to join us in Cyprus, and I would like to, with the first opportunity to discuss further and in physical presence with us here at Strategy International. I really thank you very much, and congratulations on your book publication. And I really hope we can get to talk more. I understand, and you understand better than me, that global development never cease to exist. Obviously, the challenges are far greater now, and I've clearly understood that from your discussion. And I thank you very much for being here with us.
Thank you very much, Mario. Thank you very much to Strategy International. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you all for watching Strategy International's Prime Analysis. Please subscribe, like, and follow on our social media and YouTube channel. My name is Dr. Marios Efthymiopoulos, and I'm your host at Prime Analysis. And remember, impact makes a difference.